Hi guys, it's Sophie. Welcome to Spin a Good Yarn. This is a knitting channel where we talk about how to finish your projects, get through those whips, stash down, basically knitting combined with productivity. That sounds like your kind of thing. If you're a type A girly, please do follow along. So I wanted to make a video today talking about what do we do when we get bored of knitting. And I thought I'd just start by talking about why do we get bored. So our brains love three things to give us dopamine. They love novelty, they love progress, and they love meaning. And if one of those three things drops off, our dopamine's going to go down. And when our dopamine goes down, what we respond to that with is dopamine seeking behaviour. So go for stuff that's going to give us those quick wins. So I guess what's the problem with feeling bored of knitting? Nothing really, right? Like we can just do other things. But I think there are two symptoms of dopamine drops in knitting that you might find difficult in your life too. So I think symptom number one is cast-on-itis. So perhaps you can relate. I definitely, when I get bored of knitting, find myself casting on like 10 projects, right? Just because I think that next new thing might be the thing that grabs my attention. And that can lead to piles of whips, that can lead to stagnating progress on projects you're really excited for. And I think the worst part of all is it can mean that those projects you've cast on, you don't even really want to work on anymore. It can reduce the joy rather than increase it. The other symptom I think I'm definitely guilty of, hopefully I'm not alone in this, is yarn overconsumption when I feel bored. When I feel that dopamine drop, I know that I can get that fast dopamine by buying new yarn and having that turn up, and that gives me a couple of dopamine hits. There's like the thrill of the chase, finding the yarn, finding it for a good price, finding the pattern, and also then arriving and opening it as an object. That is all instant gratification. That's all quick hits of dopamine that our brains like. And for a lot of us, I think that's the opposite of what we're trying to do with our making, with our slow making and our mindful consumption. And it can also lead to exacerbating your stash issues, potentially causing guilt, and even for some people like financial implications, right? If it's something that you're doing a lot. But ultimately, I think when we're bored, we just buy stuff we don't need. Like I think those are the two main problems for me. So this video, we're going to talk about what you can do instead, what we're going to do when we feel bored of knitting that is not casting on all the things, never to finish them, or buying things we just don't need. I'm going to jump straight into some solutions here for you, so some things that will get you that dopamine back without having those negative interactions. So here's what to do instead. So we're going to gamify for progress. So I have a number of different things here that we can do that gamify your knitting. So think about doing a whip down, using chance, roll a die, do a little spin wheel on the internet or Wheel of Fortune, or literally just write them down on a list and put your finger on the list. Work on something at random. Do a frog or finish of your projects. List them all out, be really brutally honest about which ones you want, and frog the ones you don't. Maybe do a project of the day. Think about allocating work that you can do on each day of the week. So rather than finish it February, how about finish it Friday, or Saturdays are for socks? Something I do and I love, and if you enjoy this kind of content, have a little look, but it's a knitting journal. Think about marking down your progress in a more fragmented way, I guess. Like think about what you're doing day on day so that you are seeing progress, even if the project itself isn't the thing you're seeing the progress in. Another one I love is task segmentation. So for me, that means breaking down bigger projects into either percentages with a blanket. I quite often do percentage of stitches in each section and do a little star of each. Or with garments, it can be things like the collar, like the aim for this week is to get the collar down. The aim for next week is to do one sleeve and half of another sleeve, for example, so that you're getting these mini goals within the larger project goals itself. And the last one of gamifying for progress is a stash down. And now I love stashing down videos. I don't know if you guys do. I love watching them. I love watching yarn stash tours. And I think it can be really fun to choose a small stash down target. So it might be choosing 3 yarns that you really want to work with and having those be in a separate bowl in a separate place, and they are your stash. You don't have your whole stash, you just have progress on these few little things. Those are my top tips for gamifying for progress. And then my next category is how we can play to find a sense of novelty. And novelty is one of those things we talked about that really boosts our dopamine fast. So I think of these as my quick wins, and things that I can do that move away from the knitting activity itself. There is one thing on this list that is actually about knitting. I've tried really hard to make them knitting adjacent. So yeah, hopefully that's fun. So the first one is make your own stitch markers. I had a great time doing this in December, and it's super easy. Jewelry making kit is cheap and easy to find in craft stores or online, and once you get the hang of it, you really can make anything into a stitch marker. It might be beads, old earrings, anything that you can put on a jump loop you can make a stitch marker with, and it's a really fun activity. I also think it's really fun to sew a project bag. So that might be hand sewing, or it could be machine sewing. One of my very first projects, as many people saw, was a tote bag with my sewing machine. And I made a project bag I use all the time. And I feel so proud every time I see it. But whilst I was doing it, I wasn't knitting. I wasn't forcing myself to knit. But now it's just a lovely object for when I am enjoying that project. Another one I can highly recommend is learning a new skill. So that might be maybe picking up a crochet hook if that's not something that's already in your repertoire, so that you can do really cool crochet borders to your work. Or something I do an awful lot of when I'm bored of knitting is spinning. That's why the channel is called Spin a Good Yarn, because I do hopefully spin good yarn. And it just helps you engage with fibre in a different way. I think it's so fun to just explore crafts that add to your knitting without actually having to knit. Then my next two are what I call my knitting admin tasks, but I do think if you bulk these and do them in a fun way, they can be really good at that like novelty. So one thing I really like doing is knitting upkeep. So I'll put a film on that I've wanted to watch, or I'll put on quite often like comedy, like something light, and I will go through it and I'll detail all of my jumpers. I'll go through it, I'll fix snags, and I'll do them like sequentially so that by the end my knitwear is sorted. And I think the other one that I've had a lot of fun doing is I buy little labels that just say handmade on them, and I mark the back of my garments with it. And I think that's such a fun little activity to do that makes you feel like your garments are like to a more professional quality, but again, you're not actually having to knit. One thing I haven't tried yet, but it's on my list because I'd love to try it, is to practice embroidering onto knitwear. So I would recommend doing this as like a thrift flip. Getting some machine knitted item or an old item that you have maybe that you need to repair, and just learning how to do some embroidery on it, and the next time you knit you have this skill that you can apply to a hand knitted object. Similarly, like play with new skills safely. So if you wanted to steek something, go and buy a cheap second-hand sheen quality machine knitted jumper and steek it. And don't worry about what it's going to come out like it's already probably destined for the bin. And yeah, just play with it. Have that be okay. Have it be okay for it to have a different life in a different way. And if you like the outcome, great. Or think about like techniques that you haven't been able to try, and how could you try them in a safe way. So you might want to knit yourself a colourwork sweater, but that feels so overwhelming. Why don't you try and knit a colourwork tea cozy, or a colourwork toy, like something really small, even like a scrunchie, right? Like something really little that you can just play with the technique, and you don't really, the outcome of the object isn't really the one you're wanting to work on anyway. Another couple that relate to like thrifting or reusing stuff, because we're in that realm, is go and have an explore around your local secondhand shops for vintage knitting patterns. Car boot sales in the UK in the summer are a great place to do this as well, and just have it be fun as like a game of hide and seek. Go around looking for the patterns, have a look through them, and you never know, one might spark your interest, or you might just find a really cool object. The other thing I like doing, which is just for fun, is I quite like going around secondhand stores or antique stores and finding knitting like tools. So I won't necessarily even buy them, but like, where are they? Where have they stored them? Where are the knitting needles? They'll be in there somewhere. It's like a game of hide and seek, and you don't have to buy anything. You can just be looking, but it's a really fun way to just like spark some different kinds of inspiration, I think. One that I do tend to buy stuff for is secondhand buttons. Are so easy to find, and they really can help you build up a really nice button stash. I think buttons can be a really fun way to think about a project backwards, look at buttons and think, what could this be a part of? So yeah, that's another one that is just, it's all about play, exploration, getting your hands dirty, looking through some things, and just, yeah, playing around with making in a different way. One I love, I haven't done this yet, I did do it last year, is, I didn't film about it though, is to make a skills bingo card. So what are the things you want to be able to do by the end of this year? And make it aesthetic, go on Canva, like make it cute, do like colours that you like, and yeah, just go for it. Think about what these things are, and maybe reward yourself with something. Like maybe you want a new set of circular knitting needles, maybe if you get bingo, that's what you get. I then also love the idea of using your yarn for anything apart from knitting. So we've already talked about like crochet already, but what about tapestry weaving? Like you can look up, I've seen one on Pinterest, but I'm sure you can Google it in other places as well. Like you can use antique frames or old frames to set up a tapestry loom, like a lap size tapestry loom. Why don't you use some of your stash that you just don't know what to do to weave something for the first time? Or how about trying punch needling? I really enjoyed doing that when I did that for the first time, and you can make something totally different for your home and just interact with your yarn in a new way. I also think with dopamine, there's such a lot to be said about like exploring your own stash as a shop, and I personally love doing this. My stash is small enough that I can just dump it all out and go through it, but I recognise not everyone's is. But like dive in there, refamiliarise yourself, touch those yarns, think about the colours and why they excited you to start with, and yeah, engage with your stash. Don't just let it sit there as a pile of things. Like actually go in there and touch them. This is a tactile hobby. Go and be tactile with your stash. And the last one of my novelty section is the only one I think that is knit something. And I've tried really hard not to make that the answer. But I do think there's something to be said about being really creative with very small scrap quantities. So in the end of 2025, I used up pretty much all of my scraps, and I did that by making very scrappy projects. So for example, I made a pair of socks that used scrap fingering weight sock yarn of quantities of like 5 grams or less. And it does mean you're just changing colours all the time. And again, I personally like to do it randomly. I put them in a bag that I can't see into and I pull them out at random. And the ability to just change yarn and change colours and not to be sure what's coming next can be really good for scratching that dopamine itch. And then our last option is to think deeply for meaning. So we're going to hit those meaning points. And there's a few different ways that I'm interpreting meaning as we're going through this, so I'll try and highlight them as we go. I think one of them is about like what purpose are the finished objects serving for you. So I really like to browse Pinterest and explore my own personal style, thinking about what pieces will fit within the capsule that I'm designing overall, not just the knitted items as singular pieces. Think about the kind of trousers that I like to wear, think about the kind of silhouettes that I like. How does that actually fit into my knitting world? I also think that there's a space for, but this is possibly something we do like more regularly, right? But space for like browsing Ravelry, browsing patterns, reading pattern books and getting inspiration from patterns. I think that's maybe more used to what we're more used to, so I haven't focused on that too much. But I do think there's something about inspiring ourselves to find those gaps in our wardrobe, maybe when we've identified them. The other things I think about like looking at that use is make a track of how you use your projects. That can be quite a fun thing to do. Like, do you like knitting jumpers but you don't wear them, you just wear your socks? Like this could be something about the meaning that could be challenging. So do you need to gift knit more if there's an object that you don't like wearing but someone else would? Or is there something about saying there are certain objects that I really love the object of that are worth knitting, but I need to think about how I do that in a different way, and some of that might fall to like the gamification, right? I also think we can get a lot from a wardrobe declutter, and I'm not a big fan of decluttering as an excuse to like bring shit in, take shit out, but I do think like going through your clothes, looking at what you wear and identifying the gaps. Where are the holes in your wardrobe? Where are the things that you wish for? Where are your fast fashion objects that are falling apart because they've not been well made and they're not designed to last? Where are the opportunities to replace those within your knitting so that it really feels meaningful because you know you're going to get the use out of it? I then think the next part of meaning is about engaging with the culture. So for me, I've been doing this a lot and I actually find so much joy and so much meaning from doing this. So go and find your local knitting group. It might be a knit and natter, it might be something at your local yarn store, or I recently joined a spinning guild. Check out my latest video actually for more chat about my spinning guild experience. But connect with your local community of makers and engage with what other people are making. Be curious about what other people are making. I found it really interesting to engage with knitters of different ages who are knitting completely different patterns to the kinds of ones that for me are my staples, and using different skills. I also think we can engage with people that we don't necessarily see face to face through social media, and I think this is a useful way to use social media. So just like you guys, I guess, I watch a lot of knitting YouTube content, but I also love watching illustrators, artists, filmmakers, and getting a sense of my making falling in within this wider scope of art and craft and identifying myself within a broader group of people than just a knitter. And when I say just a knitter, I mean that purely as the way that society can interpret knitting as a domestic task, not an artistic craft. So yeah, remind yourself of that and engage with other artists. I particularly love studio vlogs. Another one about our community that I think can be really rewarding and can really help with a knitting slump actually is to knit something for charity. I would definitely recommend reaching out and like figuring out what the charity want first and of what fibre before you start knitting anything. But it can be so rewarding to make something that really helps someone else, like makes a really big difference. It might be a hat that keeps someone warm when they're outside on a cold day, or it could be getting something and making something fashionable for a young person who might not have access to be able to like have things that are in their style. They may have to rely on donations that they don't suit. So I think that can be another really interesting way to use our stash and thinking about externalizing rather than internalizing meaning. Then last, in terms of meaning, I think it's about connecting our craft with the rest of the world and the ways in which we are being political in our making, even if we don't realise it. And I don't necessarily mean left or right side political. I'm talking about like capitalism. So yeah, we're going to get into it a little bit. But the first one that I've loved doing is learn more about wool. So if you're someone who knits with natural fibres, what are the breeds all about? How did they get made? Why are sheep critically endangered? Did you know that sheep are critically endangered? There are sheep that are critically endangered. How is yarn spun? Why does that matter? Where is yarn spun? How does the fashion industry process fibres? All of these things are such fun rabbit holes to dive into that will inform the meaning of your making as you make your next project. I also think we can critically engage in our understanding of how making interacts with capitalism and the world, and how we are taking a stance that is different from the flow that money would like us to go down. So what about learning about fast fashion, overconsumption? I also really like, not knitting related, but project pan videos, people using up makeup products or beauty products. Think about the way that slow fashion, which is what we are engaged in, and handmade craftsmanship is the antidote to fast fashion and the antidote to overconsumption. There's such good rabbit holes to fall down, and I guarantee will make you feel refreshed about your making. And the last one is to engage in media around making. So that might be films. One documentary I'd really recommend is the Buy Now documentary that talks about overconsumption and things we talked about, but it could also be engaging in content around like slower life. I think that can be really satisfying. Or for books, I think sometimes it's like following the life of knitters. So Knitlandia by Clara Parks is a good example. She also wrote A Stash of One's Own, very good book, talking all about stash. Or it might be talking about like fashion. So I like To Die For by Lucy Siegel, that talks about the impact of the fashion industry on our world, both in terms of the impact it has on people and also our planet. Or things about making in general. So there's a book called Why We Make Things and Why It Matters, which is a book about woodworking, but it doesn't really matter. It's why as humans making things with our hands makes a difference and what it means to get good at something over time. I think all of those ideas are something that bring meaning and bring a different perspective to our making that can just lead us feeling a bit more refreshed when we go back into it. The last tip is the most obvious of all of them. Sometimes we just need to take a break. Just don't knit for a bit. That's absolutely fine. We don't always have to knit to be productive. Sometimes we don't enjoy it. Go and do the other things you love, like video gaming. I play The Sims. You can't be knitting whilst you're playing. Well, you kind of can if you were doing certain things, but you can't really knit whilst you're playing The Sims. Go on for a run. Go and do some different activities, so that when you come back to your knitting time, it really does feel like it's worthwhile. Hopefully this video has been fun. I mean, we all get bored, right? And hopefully there's some things in here that might help you fix that. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider it. If you made it this far through the video, that would be amazing. 85% of the people who watched my videos in the last month weren't subscribed. So it really makes such a big difference to have people subscribe to the channel, helps other people find the videos, and it also helps me out in terms of growing my channel and yeah, just finding people who'd be interested in the kind of things I talk about. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.